Welcome to Congress in Context.
Hello.
Today we are trying something a little different. Usually we take a massive topic like AI or climate policy and we look at it over the course of a decade. But today we're doing the exact opposite.
Right.
We're freezing time.
We're looking at the American government through a microscope. We're focusing entirely on a single day, Tuesday, January 27, 2026.
And we have the full stack of documentation right here, the Congressional Record, Volume 172, 1919. And the goal isn't just to read the minutes of the meeting.
No.
The mission is to strip away the jargon and figure out how the machinery in Washington, which, let's be honest, often feels like it's grinding gears in a different galaxy, actually connects to real life from Minneapolis to Montana.
And it is a fascinating snapshot because this specific Tuesday offers a perfect split screen of the American political landscape.
How so?
You have the Senate, which is locked in this high-stakes, heavy, almost suffocating ideological battle. And then, right across the building, you have the House of Representatives.
Which looks quiet on the surface.
On the surface, yes. But if you dig into the paperwork, the committee reports, the filed bills, the written remarks, it is churning out some incredibly eclectic and, in some cases, explosive material.
Okay, so let's start with the Senate. You were walking into the chamber on January 27th, 2026. What was the vibe?
Tense. Heavy. The Senate returned to a looming government shutdown deadline. The clock is just ticking on funding a huge chunk of the federal government.
And the primary legislation on the table was H.R. 7148.
Right, the Consolidated Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2026.
Which is the driest possible name for, the most critical function of government.
Keeping the lights on and paying the bills. Senator John Thune, the majority leader from South Dakota, he moved to proceed to this bill. But this wasn't just a standard let's keep the government open discussion. It instantly morphed into a proxy war.
It seems like everything lately turns into a proxy war. What was the battleground this time?
Immigration and law enforcement. And this is where the context part of our show really, really matters. The debate wasn't just about abstract dollars and cents. It was about a specific tragic event in Minneapolis.
Right. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer didn't come to the floor to talk about balance sheets. He came to talk about Alex Pretti.
According to the record, Alex Pretti was a nurse who was shot and killed by a Border Patrol agent in Minneapolis. And it's a tragedy that clearly just shook the community there.
And looking at Schumer's remarks, he is not holding back. He explicitly called the agency's actions lawless disorder.
He drew a very hard line. He threatened a no vote on any funding for the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, unless IC is completely withdrawn from Minnesota.
Wow.
He is essentially using the leverage of a government shutdown to demand a massive shift in federal law enforcement policy for a specific state.
That is a massive escalation. Usually you see fights over, budget caps or deficit spending.
Yeah.
But this is specific operational policy being tied to the money. How did Majority Leader Thune respond to that? Do you engage on the specific tragedy?
Well, he acknowledged the tragedy. He called for a full investigation, which is, the standard responsible response. But then he executed a classic legislative pivot. He shifted the focus to the consequences of Schumer's threat.
The if you break it, you buy it argument.
Exactly. He argued that if Schumer blocks this bill over the ICE issue, he isn't just hurting IC, he's defunding FEMA and the Coast Guard.
So the argument becomes, if you want to fight about immigration, fine, but don't sink the disaster relief boats in the process.
It's a strategy to shift the blame for a potential shutdown squarely onto the minority leader. And it highlights how these massive consolidated bills work. Everything is tied together. You can't just defund one thing without risking the whole structure.
It's high-stakes poker, and the chips are the salaries of federal workers.
Absolutely.
Now, that wasn't the only ideological battleground in the Senate that day. There was another bill, S. 3627, the Pregnant Students' Rights Act.
Sponsored by Senator Ashley Moody of Florida.
Now, I have to say, on the surface, this title seems unassailable. Who goes on record opposing rights for pregnant students? It sounds like something that would pass by voice vote in 5 minutes.
And that is exactly why we have to read the fine print. When you look at the floor debate, it becomes very clear that this bill isn't just about helping students with class schedules.
No.
This is the post-Roe v. Wade cultural battle playing out in real time.
So what does the bill actually do?
The text of the bill requires higher education institutions to disseminate information on rights, accommodations, and resources for pregnant students.
Okay.
But the subtext and the source of the conflict is about which resources are mentioned and which are, excluded.
Let's look at the proponents first. How did the Republicans frame this?
They framed it strictly as empowerment and choice.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Thune argued it's about ensuring students don't feel forced to choose between their education and parenting. We also heard from Senator Katie Britt of Alabama and Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa.
Two very prominent voices in the Senate on this issue.
Right. They connected the bill directly to the March for Life, framing the legislation as a necessary support system for women who choose to carry a pregnancy to term. They argue that universities often pressure students toward abortion, and this bill sort of balances the scales.
But then you had Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. He's a physician, right?
Yes, he is. And he took the conversation into much deeper, more technical medical waters. He didn't just talk about student rights. He pivoted the debate to the dangers of chemical abortion drugs, specifically mifepristone.
That seems like a specific turn.
It was. He cited testimony from Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill about coercion and a lack of medical oversight. So for Senator Cassidy, this bill serves as a shield against what he views as a predatory abortion industry that pushes dangerous drugs on vulnerable students.
Okay, so that's the yay side. What about the opponents?
Yeah.
I see Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii had a very different interpretation of what rights means in this context.
Diametrically opposite. Senator Hirono argued that the bill isn't about providing information, it's about censoring it.
How so?
She pointed out that the bill excludes information about abortion and contraception options. She called it government-mandated bias.
So her argument is that if a university is federally mandated to tell a pregnant student about adoption services, but, effectively banned from mentioning abortion services, that's not rights. That's steering.
Precisely. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland backed her up on this. He argued that if the goal was truly to support pregnant students, the legislation would focus on comprehensive maternity care and affordable child care.
The actual economic stuff.
Right, addressing the economic barriers to parenting rather than just limiting the healthcare information available.
So we have two totally different realities being presented on the same floor. One side sees protection and empowerment. The other side sees censorship and restriction. What happened to the bill?
This brings us to the most important technical takeaway of this deep dive. The cloture vote.
We hear cloture on the news constantly, cloture invoked. But let's actually break it down for the listener. What is the mechanic here?
Well, the Senate was designed to be a deliberative body, which is a fancy way of saying senators can talk forever if they want to. Cloture is the only mechanism to say, okay, enough talking, let's actually vote on the bill itself.
Right.
It ends the debate.
But there's a catch.
There's always a catch. To invoke cloture and end debate, you generally need a supermajority. 3/5 of the Senate.
So 60 votes.
That is 60 votes.
And looking at the tally here, the vote was 47 yeas to 45 nays.
So the yeas had the majority. In a simple democracy, or even in the House of Representatives, the bill passes.
Right.
But in the U.S. Senate, it failed. They didn't reach 60, so the motion is rejected, the debate continues indefinitely, and the bill is effectively dead in the water.
It is wild to think that you can win the vote count but lose the legislation. It really emphasizes how the minority party in the Senate retains just massive blocking power.
It is the defining feature of the modern Senate. And actually, there was a tiny procedural moment right before that vote that's worth noting. Senator Thune asked to waive the mandatory quorum call.
What is the significance of that? Is that just housekeeping?
It is housekeeping, but it tells us something about the mood. A quorum is the minimum number of members present to do business. And usually, when things are really contentious, they use quorum calls to stall for time, make the clerk read every name slowly.
Oh.
Waiving it is basically the Senate saying, look, we all know we're here. We all know how this vote is going to go. Let's not waste 20 minutes.
Efficiency in government. We love to see it, even in small doses.
Exactly.
Okay, so the Senate is in gridlock, high drama, no movement. Let's head across the rotunda to the House of Representatives.
A completely different atmosphere. The House met at 12:30 p.m. with Representative Adrian Smith of Nebraska acting as Speaker pro tempore. The floor debate was quiet, but the committee paperwork.
The paperwork was explosive. I was looking at the report from the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Representative James Comer dropped two resolutions that feel like political dynamite.
Dynamite is the right word. He reported resolutions recommending that the House find former President William J. Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary R. Clinton in contempt of Congress.
Contempt of Congress is a serious charge. This is regarding subpoenas.
Yes, for refusal to comply with subpoenas. We don't have the full transcript of the committee hearing in this specific record, but the filing itself signals that even though the floor is quiet, the investigative gears are grinding very hard in the background.
It marks a continued, very aggressive use of that oversight power by the House GOP.
It does.
But the House docket isn't just investigations. I was struck by how eclectic the new legislation is. We have bills about everything from libraries to national parks.
It really runs the gamut. On one hand, you have H.R. 7247 from Representative Cleaver, which would provide grants for prison libraries.
Which is a very specific policy, aim literacy and rehabilitation.
Right. And then, almost comically specific, you have H.R. 7251 from Representative Elfrith. This bill prohibits the use of images of living political figures on national parks passes.
Wait, is that a problem we have? Are politicians putting their faces on the annual park pass?
Apparently enough of a concern to warrant federal legislation, it's likely a preemptive move to stop any administration from using non-political assets, like the Grand Canyon Pass for branding or campaigning.
And then there was H.R. 7270 from Representative Sessions regarding identity fraud. It just shows that while the Senate is fighting these massive culture wars, the House is tossing out bills about very niche, specific administrative issues.
It's the spaghetti at the wall phase of the legislative cycle. Introduce everything, see what sticks.
But here's my favorite part of the congressional record. We focus so much on the bills and the fights, but there is this back section called extensions of remarks.
This is the hidden gem of Congress.
Feels like the social media feed of the House, but official.
In a way, yes. Members can submit written statements to the record that aren't part of a debate. They use this to honor constituents, celebrate local milestones, or explain how a bill affects their specific district.
It's where the national legislature becomes local. And on this Tuesday, there was a surprising amount of love for local broadcasting.
A huge amount. You had Representative Mike Flood from Nebraska paying tribute to 3 broadcasting legends. He honored Gary Sadlemeyer, who retired after 50 years at KFAB, and Rob McCartney, an anchor at KETV.
50 years on air. That is an institution.
And he also honored the late Loran Schmidt, a legendary ethanol advocate. It's very Nebraska.
And it wasn't just Nebraska. Representative Dusty Johnson from South Dakota honored J.P. Skelly.
For 40 years of service at KORN News Radio.
Why do you think there's so much focus on radio hosts?
Well, it highlights how vital local radio still is in these rural districts. These representatives know that honoring a local radio host in the congressional record is good politics. It shows they're listening to the people who talk to their voters every single morning.
It connects them to the daily rhythm of the district.
For sure.
Speaking of connecting to the district, we have to talk about the rodeo clown.
I was hoping we would get to the rodeo clown.
Representative Troy Downing from Montana used his time to celebrate Flint Rasmussen.
A legend. A famous rodeo entertainer from Havre, Montana, who was inducted into the Rodeo Hall of Fame.
That is just fantastic.
It is, but think about the contrast. You go from debating the legality of abortion drugs and government shutdowns in the Senate to honoring a rodeo clown in the House. That is the American spectrum right there. It reminds us that these politicians represent specific cultures, not just ideologies.
And then there's the longevity angle. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania wished a happy 100th birthday to Elizabeth Shan.
A former ballroom dance instructor and Navy purser assistant during World War II.
And Representative Mario Diaz-Balart recognized the 100th anniversary of the city of Miami Springs. So we have a centenarian person and a centennial city on the same day.
It's charming, but it also serves a purpose. This is retail politics, immortalized in the federal record. It tells the district, I see you, I am celebrating you. When Elizabeth Shan gets a copy of the congressional record with her name in it, that matters to her family and her community.
We also saw some local pride in sports. Representative Josh Harder from California honored the St. Mary's High School football team from Stockton
for winning the CIF Division II AA state championship. Again, hyper-local.
But the extensions of remarks aren't just for birthdays and rodeo clowns. Some members use them to make pretty sharp policy points that didn't make it to the floor debate.
Absolutely. Look at Representative Betty McCollum from Minnesota. She submitted a statement supporting H.R. 706, which is about appropriations. But she didn't just say, pass the bill.
Oh.
She specifically highlighted the CDFI fund community development financial institutions.
Why focus on that specific fund?
Because she argues it is critical for small businesses in the Twin Cities. And she used the remarks to contrast this funding with President Trump's proposed cuts. She's using this quiet written record to fight for local economic interests against the national executive agenda.
It's a way of putting her position on paper without having to fight for time at the microphone.
Precisely.
And there was a very somber note from Representative Sharice Davids of Kansas.
Yes. She marked the one-year anniversary of the collision between American Eagle Flight 5342 and a U.S. Army helicopter at Reagan National Airport.
I remember that. It was a shocking event.
And Representative Davids connected that tragedy back to Wichita, Kansas, calling it the air capital of the world. She noted how deeply that loss was felt by Kansas families connected to the aviation industry.
It really illustrates how a tragedy in D.C. ripples back to the districts. It's not just Washington news to them, it's local news.
Exactly.
So when we step back and synthesize this whole day, Tuesday, January 27, 2026, what do we see? We see a Senate that is institutionally gridlocked. The big bills funding the government, student rights, are stalled by the filibuster or held hostage by proxy wars.
Legislation versus implementation. The machinery is just stuck.
But look at what did pass the Senate that day. They passed S-Rays A589,
Which is
congratulated Montana State University football on their FCS championship.
Say Buckets.
And they passed S3605, creating a semi-quincentennial congressional time capsule.
So football and time capsules, those are the things that can get unanimous consent.
Apparently. Those are the only things that pass easily. When the gears of the big legislative machine grind to a halt because of partisan gridlock, like we saw with the DHS funding fight, the system defaults to two things: ceremonial unity, like the football resolutions, or hyper-local connection, like the extensions of remarks.
It seems like the extensions of remarks are a mechanism for members to prove their relevance when they can't actually legislate. Representative Downing can't single-handedly solve the appropriations crisis, but he can make sure Flint Rasmussen is in the history books.
That's exactly right. It's a survival mechanism for politicians in a gridlocked era. If you can't deliver the big law, you deliver the local honor.
And this duality, the broken macro and the functioning micro, raises a pretty provocative question for us to leave with the listener.
Let's hear it.
If Congress is paralyzed on the big issues, if they can't agree on funding the government or defining healthcare rights, who fills the vacuum? Because the problems don't just go away.
The power has to go somewhere.
It shifts. It shifts to the executive branch through executive orders, or it shifts to the courts. When the legislature fails to legislate, unelected judges and the president become the lawmakers by default.
That is a scary thought. We are watching the legislative branch cede its authority one failed cloture vote at a time, leaving us with nothing but football trophies and time capsules.
And you have to ask, are we just burying our problems in that time capsule for a future Congress to solve?
Something to mull over. And hey, if you want to check our work, if you want to read the full text of the Clinton contempt resolutions, or see exactly what Senator Cassidy said about mifepristone, or just learn more about rodeo legends like Flint Rasmussen, you can.
It is all public record.
You can search the congressional record for January 27, 2026 at congress.gov. It's dense, but it's fascinating. Transparency is the first step to understanding.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Congress in context. We'll see you next time.